Hey guys, it's me, Mr.250, and welcome back to Umineko. That last bit was a bit of a letdown, honestly, it really was. You got to see all the adults, all the kids, all the workers, and then you saw Beatrice, and I was thinking, maybe she's gonna jump out now, and like someone's gonna die, or something's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden it's 6 a.m. But maybe something did happen and we're gonna discover it, I'm hoping. Because that was a lot of build-up for nothing. Genji once again tightened his bow tie, and looked outside through a crack in the curtains. Maybe the rain had died down a tiny bit since the previous night. But it didn't look like the thick of rain clouds were planning to let any trace of the morning sun get by. The morning was dim, and far from refreshing.
やはり今日いっぱいはやみそうにないか。
お待たせしました、源氏様。
Cannon finished checking his appearance, and exited the washroom. In a normal schedule, it was rare for anyone to have to suffer going straight from a midnight shift to a morning shift. There was a special system for the 2 days of the family conference. But then, as long as the typhoon didn't leave today, the relative stay on this island would last until tomorrow. Cannon thought that it was best to be prepared for the special schedule to be extended one more day. The two of them left the guest house, opening their umbrellas. The rose garden had been devastated by the wind and rain last night. Even though they had spent several days making it beautiful to welcome the guests, it had only taken one stormy night to ruin it. Cannon sighed. The two headed for the mansion. I don't know, it doesn't look too bad. But, of course, that's just a representation, I'm sure. They were supposed to meet up with Goda and prepare breakfast. Goda was such a perfectionist that he'd probably already woken up, and was probably already preparing a breakfast both exquisite and as elegant as glasswork. They reached the overhang by the entrance to the mansion, and folded up their umbrellas. Genji took it from his pocket, a bundle of several keys, and used it to unlock the front door. There was nothing on Rokenjima outside the Ushirimiya family mansion, so, in the past, they hadn't been in the habit of locking up. However, Natsui had ordered that the mansion would be locked up from midnight to early morning. After that, unlocking the door in the early morning had become part of the servants' morning shift. This task had been given to Genji and Cannon, so that Goda could begin the preparations for breakfast as soon as he woke up. Silence had fallen in the mansion, giving the impression that the mansion itself was asleep.
では、朝の仕事を始めよう。
はい。
The two of them split up, and began opening the curtains throughout the mansion. If the curtains remained closed, the inside of the mansion would still be dim, as if it hadn't managed to escape the previous night, and they wouldn't be able to clean. Cannon, in a well-rehearsed procedure, went around the mansion opening one window after another without having to retrace his steps once. Even with this horrible weather, by opening the curtains, it began to feel just a little bit like morning. While doing that, he passed in front of the kitchen. Even though he knew he wouldn't be able to smell it yet, his stomach started aching for some of Goda's much bragged about cooking.
おはようございます。
He tried to greet Goda, who he thought would be preparing the meal inside the kitchen, but Goda was nowhere to be seen. The kitchen was darkly lit, and there was no fan for ventilation, much less curtains to be opened. Since it was still cold without a hint of a fire, it was obvious that no preparations for breakfast were taking place. Even though it wouldn't be permitted, maybe Goda had overslept? Even servants are human. They can sometimes be late when they are unable to wake up. In the rare case when that happened, clamoring to hide the unsightly scene, casually smoothing it over, and making sure the presence of such a mistake was never noticed by the master, were just some of a servant's virtues. Cannon took the receiver off of the phone that had been fitted to the wall, and dialed the number for the extension line to the room where the servant slept. He couldn't hear that characteristic sound of a dial tone. Cannon tried picking up the receiver again, but even so, he couldn't hear the usual dial tone. He tried dialing again, but it had no apparent effect. Could it be that the lightning last night had done something to one of the machines, and broken the extension phone? The equipment in this mansion was all worn out. Cannon fully understood that even the smallest thing could have caused it to break down. Cannon gave up trying to wake him with the phone, and dashed over to the room where the servant slept. And he found... White! Oh no, Light. How long had she slept until? How long it had been since she had awoken, and stared lazily staring up at the ceiling? Started lazily staring... Yeah, that vague sense of awakening was Natsui's usual morning experience. Her sleep was always light, and she wouldn't even have been able to sleep at all without medicine. To Natsui, sleeping was definitely not a happy thing. I think Natsui needs to chill down with everything in her life, including sleeping. When she looked outside, she saw that it was still pouring. If she hadn't sensed a tiny amount of light, she might have mistakenly thought that it was still last night. She herself was one of the hosts, so she mustn't wake up later than her guests. Urging herself on, she raised up her body, which still hadn't completely recovered from yesterday's weariness. While she was inside this room, no one would torment her. Her headache wouldn't get any worse than it already was. This room was her only peaceful space. So, when she left, it meant returning to the world of her husband's siblings probing each other's minds. Then, wouldn't it be better just to stay locked up in this room forever? Natsui smiled bitterly at this delusion. She was starting to sound like Kinzo. Even though most of the time she would carelessly call Kinzo names, for staying locked up in his own room, the truth was that she actually longed to do so herself. Natsui gave her head a small shake, and her fantasy was replaced by the reawakening of her usual headache. When she reached for the doorknob, trying to leave the room, her hand touched the scorpion charm that she'd hung from it before going to sleep the previous night. Does that mean that's the only reason why she's not dead yet? It was Maria's charm that Jessica had given Natsui. Surely, Jessica had said something about it having the power to repel magic, and that she should hang it from her doorknob. Maybe it was thanks to the charm, that at least this room had been protected from her husband's siblings' malice. As she thought this, her mood began to get a little more cheerful. Then Natsui remembered. That's right. Last night, I promised Jessica that I would give her a charm of my own in exchange for this one, didn't I? Natsui opened a drawer on her dresser, and she took out an antique accessory case that she had treasured when she was a child. Inside, there were many small objects that Natsui had thought were valuable at the time. From amidst those, she pulled out a red pouch. Inside was a small round mirror, about 10 centimeters across. It looked quite old, but the design on the back of the mirror was very ornate, and it felt like something with historical value. At the very least, it looked much more effective when compared to the other charm, which looked like a plastic scorpion key holder. She had heard that this mirror was a spiritual mirror to ward off evil spirits, and she had been given it specially by her grandmother when her grandfather's mementos had been distributed. It had been believed since long ago that a strange power slept in that mirror. It was believed that, in the same way it reflected light, it also reflected misfortune and malice. Natsui returned the mirror to its pouch. It would probably be a fitting object to hand over to Jessica. Probably. Just as she was placing it in her pocket, the sound of someone knocking on the door suddenly echoed through the room.
Hi.
Oh, it's just Genji, it's fine. No servant had ever come to her this early in the morning, nor had they ever come to her directly. Maybe something bad had happened. For example, maybe some fatal oversight had been made during the preparations for breakfast, and the household had been put to shame in front of the guests, or something. Hint on the word fatal, maybe. Natsui took a deep breath in anticipation for whatever trouble she was about to be told of. When she opened the door, Genji once again said a morning greeting to her, while bowing deeply. Natsui tentatively responded.
おはようございます。何かありましたか？
申し訳ございません。昨夜の落雷で電話機器に故障
Oh,
が出
that's
て
all? Okay.
内線電話が不通になっておりますもので、直接のお伺いになってしまったことをお許しください。
内線電話が普通？それは面倒になりましたね。修理は可能ですか？
残念ながら故障箇所が分かりません。後で業者を呼んで修理させたいと思います。
ということは、この台風が過
Oh
ぎるま
no,
では
our
修理可能と
telephone
いうこと
system
で
is
すか？
down. How will we be able to talk to each other? Oh wait, we have feet and mouths. Yeah.
つまり、客人たちの滞在中はずっと普通ということですね。
I mean, you could go walk out there.
客人たちのお世話に支障は？
出ないよう最善を尽くします。
結構です。
I mean, seriously, this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. I feel like you could easily circumvent the problem by just having them walk around a lot and maybe having someone stationed if there's a big group of them.
粗相のないようよろしく頼みます。
I mean, it shouldn't be that hard, just a little bit more work than normal. Natsui let out a small sigh of relief. She'd been prepared for the worst. But damage to the telephone wasn't the kind of trouble she was worried about. But then, even this would probably be enough to spark sarcasm from Eva, and Eva should just chill out. Everyone needs to chill out. Everyone's so snippy at each other and it's stupid telephones. Natsui gave her head a light shake.
朝食の準備は順調ですか？
それがゴーダの姿が見えません。
Did it go to get eaten?
朝食の支度もまだ行われておらず。
なんですって？
Natsui was indignant. To her, this was a much bigger problem than the phones not working. And despite that, this piece of information was the part that had been postponed. Why did everything go well most of the time? And then, when something like this, when the relatives were visiting? Natsui smacked her head with her hand and nodded distractedly.
大方朝寝坊でもしているのでしょう。とにかく、誰でもいいから急いで朝食の準備を。
Natsui exited the hall and turned around for a second to close the door to her room. The unpleasant thing that she saw there silenced her completely. Oh. There was a dark red liquid stuck to her fingers, and some unpleasant marks around the doorknob that looked as though something had been tearing at it. Oh, and I bet that charm did something, didn't it? Oh, this is exciting. It was as though someone had soaked both of their hands in blood and groped at the door and the knob. Like someone had wanted to stage something like that and left this mark as an awful prank.
これは悪趣味な。
私も今ここにお伺いして初めて気づきました。後ほど清掃いたします。
大方、趣味の悪い客人の冗談でしょう。
Why would they do that? Like, that's stupid.
不愉快です。
We're gonna leave red jam on your doorknob and scratch your door because we're jerks. Who in the world would pull such a childish and disgusting prank? Natsui had a pretty good idea, but of course there was no proof. So even if she pushed the issue, it would just seem as though she was making a fuss about nothing. On the contrary, after having such a prank played on her, it would definitely be better if she didn't notice it. Natsui gave the order to have it cleaned, and headed off to the parlor with a squeak of her heels. Was anybody else dead? No, you guys aren't dead. Good. When Natsui and Genji arrived in the parlor, Eva and Hideyoshi were already there.
おはようございます、皆さん。
おはよう、夏日さん。朝食も合田さんが作るっちゅう話やないか。朝から胃袋が大喜びで騒ぎっぱなしなんや。
本家の楽しみは食事くらいがせいぜいですものね。
エヴァさんも朝からご機嫌がよろ
Are
しい。
you really pleased? You seem the opposite of pleased right now. Natsui returned to Eva's gaze, which was fiercely competitive even though it was early in the morning, with a weary expression. Then Cannon jogged in. After bowing an apology to the relatives for running inside the mansion, he noticed Genji and told him something in a small voice.
カノン、ゴーダはまだ見つからないのですか？
申し訳ございません、奥様。お屋敷内もゲストハウスも回ったのですが、まだ。
一体どこへ行ったというのです？とりあえず今はゴーダより朝食の準備が先決です。至急対応しなさい。
はい。
Kanon glanced at Genji. It looked like he had something else to report, but that he was asking Genji whether he should say it himself. Genji nodded, and he decided to give the report himself.
奥様、ゴーダだけではありません。旦那様の姿もありません。
Uh-oh.
主人が？
はい。奥様より先に旦那様に朝食の準備がないことをご報告しようと思い、それから旦那様だけではありません。
Well, who all is missing then?
ルドルフ様ご夫妻とローザ様のお姿もありません。
Wow.
ゲストハウスにも屋敷にもですか？
はい。
The crazy homeless man in the woods has been doing a lot of work today.
ゲストハウスの部屋にもおられません。
When she'd heard that Goda alone was missing, she had thought that he might have slept in or was loafing around somewhere. But once she heard that several of the relatives were also missing, her optimistic way of thinking began to change. Could last night's family conference have continued all night and still be going on? It was also imaginable that they wanted to cool off their heads after being in that stuffy room, and they had all gone off on their own walks throughout the rain. The part about cooling off their heads really sounded like something Cross would like to say. Probably, Goda had been called to go with them to aid them with something. Goda was not a man who lost track of time. He had to have understood that, if he did not return, the preparations for breakfast would be hindered. Even so, there had been that inescapable atmosphere, so maybe that conference had continued to this very moment. I see, thought Natsui. To her, this was... Whoop, I accidentally clicked again. Let's scroll up. This had been an extremely persuasive theory. Natsui remembered the illusion that she had felt that morning of being sucked into a continuation of the previous night. When she learned that the feeling wasn't just an illusion, she once again took a deep, weary breath. Because that banquet of filthy vultures circling around Kinzo's property was still continuing.
大方、庭園のどこか、あるいは海岸の方で相も変わらず遺産の話を繰り返しているのでしょう。とにかくゴーダを呼び戻さなくてはいつまでも朝食の準備が整いません。
ってことはなんや、兄さんたちの話し合いはまだ続いとるんか。
She had planned to say it in a small voice, but Hideyoshi overheard Natsui and managed to grasp the situation.
兄さんもルドルフもタフね。ローザの場合は若さかしら。私たち夕べの24時過ぎにはもう眠くてベッドに戻らせてもらったんだけど、確かにあの時点でもまだ兄さんたちは熱論を交わしてたわ。男って熱くなると嫌ね。
Natsui snorted, her face still blank.
カノン、表を探してらっしゃい。ゴーダを見つけたらすぐに戻って朝食の準備をするよう伝えなさい。
かしこまりました。
夏日姉さん、表とは限らないわよ。お父様の書斎ってことはないかしら。
I suppose that's possible, but unlikely.
なるほど、考えられん話やないで。どういう話の流れかはわからんが、お父さんの主催に場所を移してお父さんにも混じってもらって議論を続けてるっちゅう可能性は十分あるやろ。
そのような汚らわしい話題を好んでお父様が書斎へ招き入れることなど考えられません。
あらそう。じゃあ仕方ないわね。源氏さんとカノン君は申し訳ないけど外を探してきてちょうだい。確かに兄さんなら頭を冷やすために外を散歩しようなんて言い出しても不思議はないわ。 たとえこんな天気でもね。私はお父様の書斎に行ってくるわ。ひょっとするとそこにいるかもしれないしね。
客人であるエヴァさんにそこまでのご足労はおかけできません。私が行ってきます。朝のご挨拶も兼ねて。
あら、じゃあお願いするわね。でも朝の挨拶を交わしてくれるかは疑わしいわね。夏日姉さんってお父様とは仲よろしかったかしら？
仲が良いかは分かりかねますが、後宮家の跡継ぎの妻を許されるだけの信頼を得ていると確信しています。
ならきっと返事くらい
Eva,
は
really?
してくれるわね。
Like, this is not the time for this.
お父様とは朝食くらいご一緒したいの。ぜひ降りてきてくださるよう説得してくれないかしら？私たちはすっかり嫌われちゃってるみたいだけど。
Really,
そこまで
Eva?
信頼を
Really?
得ている夏日
Like,
姉
there's
さん
no
の
reason
言
for
う
this,
ことな
really.
ら聞いてくれそうですもの。そこまで短歌を切ってお父様を説得できず一人で降りてきちゃったりしたら、信頼を得ているなんて二度と言えないかもね。
自信はありませんが努力はします。
Natsui responded, discouraged. However, knowing Kinzo's temperament, she had absolutely no confidence in her ability to bring him out. Eva herself was making light of the fact that this couldn't be done. But even so, Natsui would lose face if she gave up, saying it was impossible, and let Eva go instead. Eva's mean-spirited and unreasonable demand made Natsui clench her fist slightly. When Genji realized this, he softly spoke to her over her shoulder.
奥様、よろしければこれをお持ちください。
それは？
Genji handed Natsui a sparkling gold key of ornate design. It was the key to Kinzo's study. The study would always lock itself, and couldn't be unlocked as long as Kinzo forbade entrance. However, since Genji was especially trusted by Kinzo, he was allowed to carry a key to that door.
でもこの鍵を使ったらあなたも咎めを受けるのではありませんか？
親方様は深くお休みになられている時、扉を、それに親方様にお部屋を出ていただくよう説得するには。
源氏。
Until now, Natsui had thought of Genji as a cold servant who, since he worked directly under Kinzo, would not do anything for her. But it looked like she would have to alter her understanding of him. She wanted to communicate her feelings of thanks, but by then, Genji had already turned his back on her, and was walking down the corridor with Cannon. The words that reached Natsui from behind her as she watched them go were sneering.
じゃあお父様を必ず連れてきてね。
Like, seriously, Eva, I know I don't like Natsui either, but you're really not making this any
息子の
better.
かわいい嫁の言うことですもの。きっと聞いてくれるわよ。私たちは客人だからここでのんびりくつろがせて
I
もらう
bet
わ。
you would drop forks on the floor on purpose to have servants pick them up if it suited your fancy.
予算かえば口が過ぎるで。すまんが夏日姉さん、お父さんのことをよろしく頼むわ。
Natsui, without answering, forcefully spun around on her heels and quickly left that place. Stupid jerks, making my life terrible. Eh. After all that excitement the previous night, there was no way anyone was going to wake up soon. George, Aniki, Jessica, and I were snoring loudly on the bed in the cousin's room. But Maria, who didn't join in, and who had gone straight to bed the previous night, suddenly and completely opened her eyes. Yeah, we're gonna leave it off for there. I was really thinking something would have happened by now. I mean, it looks like something has happened, something mysterious, but nothing, like, bad mysterious. We just don't know where people are. But maybe, I mean, obviously in the future something will happen, I'm sure. So, we will look more into that next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!